My mom sent that text at 4:47 in the afternoon, while my son was still wearing his paper birthday hat and asking me for the third time if Grandma was almost here. Sorry we couldn't make it. Something came up. Give Mason a hug for us. That was it. 11 words for a 5-year-old who'd been talking about this party for 2 weeks straight. My name is Rachel. I'm 34, and up until that Saturday in March, I thought I understood exactly where I stood with my mother. I was wrong about that, and it took me finding a receipt in her checkbook 3 weeks later to understand how wrong. I want to tell you what happened between that text message and the receipt, because I think a lot of people know exactly this kind of silence. The kind where someone says something came up and you're supposed to just accept it and move on. I didn't move on. Not right away, and honestly, not ever completely. But I did something better than staying angry. I paid attention. Welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, I'm glad you found us. If this story feels familiar to you in any way, do me a favor and hit subscribe, because we've got a lot more of these real family stories coming. And before we get into it, I want to ask you something. Have you ever done everything right for someone and still watched them show up for everyone else first? Drop that in the comments. I read every one. Okay, let me back up a little so you understand who I am and what my family looks like, because none of what happened later makes sense without it. I work as a bookkeeper. I do the books for 4 small businesses in town, one of which, for the last 6 years, has been my mother's flower shop. I'm good with numbers. I notice patterns. It's not a flashy skill, but it's the kind of skill that quietly becomes important later, and this story is one of those times. I'm married to Tom, who fixes HVAC systems for a living and has more patience than any person I've ever met. We have one son, Mason. He turned 5 that March, and for weeks beforehand, he'd been telling anyone who'd listen that Grandma June was coming to his party and that she promised him a big present, not a little one. My mother, June, is 61. She ran the flower shop for almost 30 years. She's the kind of woman people describe as a force at church potlucks, always the one organizing something, always the one people call when they need help moving or need a ride or need someone to watch their kids on short notice. She's generous. I want to be fair about that, because she is, genuinely, generous with her time and her money. Just not always with me. My younger sister, Danielle, is 29. She's never had a full-time job that lasted more than 8 months. She's been engaged twice, married once, divorced once, all before 30. And every single time something falls apart for Danielle, my mother is there within the hour. I don't say this with bitterness, I say it because it's just what always happened, and I'd stopped noticing it as unusual. It was just the shape of our family. My dad passed away when I was 19, so my mom's been on her own a long time, and I think that's part of why she and Danielle got so close. Danielle needed her more, or at least, that's the story we all told ourselves. I didn't need my mother in the same way. I had a stable marriage, a steady job, a kid who slept through the night by 10 months old. I didn't call her crying at midnight. So maybe, in her mind, I didn't need her showing up either. That Saturday, Mason's party was at 2 p.m. Just family, cake, a bounce house we rented for the backyard. Small. My mother had confirmed she was coming exactly 1 week earlier, in a text where she asked what size gift bag she should bring for the big present. At 1:15, she texted asking if she should bring extra napkins. At 1:50, nothing. At 2:30, Mason started asking where Grandma was. At 3:15, I called her. It went to voicemail. At 4:47, that text came in. Sorry we couldn't make it. Something came up. I remember standing in my kitchen holding my phone, watching Mason through the window, still checking the driveway every few minutes like she might still pull up. Tom came up behind me and read the text over my shoulder and just said, "Huh." That was it. That was the whole reaction, because honestly, we were both too tired of being disappointed by that point to work up real anger. I texted back, "Everything okay? Mason kept asking for you." She replied almost an hour later, "We're fine, just got tied up. Tell him I'm sorry." We. That word sat with me longer than I expected. Tied up doing what, with who? I didn't push it that day. I put my son to bed that night, and he asked me again, quieter this time, if Grandma didn't like his party. I told him she loved him and something must have come up. I hated saying it because I didn't believe it myself, and 5-year-olds can usually tell. For the next couple weeks, life went on. My mother called a few times, mentioned nothing about that Saturday, and I didn't bring it up either. That's something I want to be honest about. I'm not someone who confronts people easily. I let things sit. I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. Then, on a Tuesday afternoon in April, I was doing the quarterly books for the flower shop, like I do every 3 months, going through the register receipts and matching them against the bank statement. It's tedious work, but I'm careful about it because my mother is not, and small mistakes compound if nobody catches them. I noticed a withdrawal for $1,000, cash, taken out of the shop's business savings account on March 14th, the Saturday of Mason's birthday party. I stared at that line for a while. My mother didn't carry that kind of cash for shop expenses. Her biggest single purchase in a normal month was maybe $600 for wholesale flowers. I called her, expecting maybe an equipment repair, a supplier issue, something boring. "Oh, that," she said, and I could hear her adjusting something, moving around her kitchen. That was for Danielle. She needed help with the down payment on her apartment. I told her I'd help however I could. On March 14th, I said, "I think so, why?" That was Mason's birthday party. There was a pause. Not a long one, but long enough that I knew she understood exactly what I was pointing out. "Rachel, it wasn't planned that way." Danielle called me in a panic. The landlord needed the deposit by end of day or she was going to lose the unit. I had to go to the bank right then. I couldn't exactly wait until Monday. "You could have called me. I would have understood if you were going to be late. Instead, you said something came up and left it at that." I didn't want to make it a whole thing. I felt bad enough already. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because it wasn't rage. It was something quieter and colder than that. It was the specific feeling of finally seeing a pattern you'd spent years pretending not to notice. I asked her, "How many times has Danielle needed emergency help like that in the last 2 years?" She got defensive fast. "That's not fair, Rachel. She's had a hard time." "I'm not saying she hasn't. I'm asking how many times." She didn't answer that. She changed the subject to whether I'd finished the shop's tax paperwork, and I let her, because I needed time to think before I said anything else. That night, I did something I probably should have done a long time ago. I went back through 3 years of the shop's bank statements, which I had access to as her bookkeeper, and I made a simple list. Every unusual cash withdrawal, every emergency transfer, and the date. It took me 2 evenings. The pattern wasn't subtle once I put it on paper. 11 withdrawals over 3 years, all between $1,500 and $6,000, every one of them going to help Danielle. A car repair. A security deposit. Bail money once, which I hadn't even known about. Credit card debt, twice. And 3 of those 11 dates lined up with events in my own family. Mason's 2nd birthday. My wedding anniversary dinner, the one where she'd canceled saying she had a migraine. And now this one. I didn't confront her with the full list right away. I sat with it for a few days. Tom found me at the kitchen table one night with the papers spread out and asked what I was doing. "Making sure I'm not imagining something," I told him. "Are you?" "No. I'm not imagining it at all." The next weekend, I drove over to see her in person, because some conversations don't belong over the phone. I brought the folder with me, but I didn't lead with it. I told her, plainly, that I needed her to understand something and that I wasn't looking for an argument. "I love you," I said. "And I know you love Mason. But I need you to know that showing up for him has to matter as much as showing up for Danielle. I can't keep explaining to my son why Grandma keeps almost coming." She started to say something about how Danielle needs more support right now, and I stopped her gently. "I'm not asking you to stop helping your daughter. I'm telling you what it's cost on this side of the family, and I need you to actually hear it, not just apologize and do the same thing again in 6 months." I put the folder on the table. I didn't slide it toward her dramatically or make a speech out of it. I just told her what it was. This is every time in the last 3 years an emergency for Danielle came first. I'm not showing you this to punish you. I'm showing you because I don't think you realize how often it's happened. She looked through a few pages. She got quiet in a way I hadn't seen from her before, not defensive quiet, just still. I didn't think of it that way, she said eventually. I thought I was just helping when I could. I know. That's kind of the problem. It never felt like a decision to you. It just kept happening. I told her what I'd decided, and I want to be clear, I decided this before that conversation, not in the heat of it. I told her I was stepping back from doing the shop's books. Not out of spite, but because I needed some distance, and because handling her finances while also being the daughter she consistently deprioritized had started to feel like carrying something I shouldn't have to carry. I told her Mason and I would love to see her, on her terms and her schedule, whenever she was actually able to be present, but that we weren't going to keep building around promises that came with an asterisk. I've made my decision, I told her. This isn't a punishment. It's just what I need. She didn't argue. I think, honestly, she didn't have it in her to argue, not with the numbers sitting right there in front of her. I won't pretend everything transformed overnight, because it didn't. My mother is 61 years old, and people don't rebuild a lifetime of habits in a single conversation. But something did shift. She hired an actual accountant for the shop, which felt strange, but also right. And a few months later, in June, she came to a much smaller occasion, just a Sunday dinner, nothing at stake, no emergency competing for her attention. She showed up 20 minutes early. She brought Mason a book about dinosaurs and sat on the floor with him for almost an hour, reading it twice because he asked her to. Danielle and I had a harder conversation. I told her once, calmly, that I didn't resent her for needing help, but that I needed her to understand what it had cost elsewhere. She didn't take it well at first. She accused me of trying to control what Mom did with her own money. I let that sit, because some things people need time to actually hear. It's been over a year now since that birthday party. Mason turned 6 this March, and my mother was there the whole time. No calls to take, no cash to withdraw for anyone else. She stayed for cake. She stayed after cake, actually helping Tom fold up the tables in the backyard while the sun went down. I don't know if she fully understands, even now, why that mattered so much to me. Some things you can explain with a folder of bank statements, and some things people just have to feel on their own, in their own time. What I learned through all of this wasn't really about my mother, or even about Danielle. It was about the difference between loving someone and constantly rearranging your own worth to fit whatever room they've left for you. I spent a long time accepting less because I told myself I didn't need as much. Turns out, needing less doesn't mean deserving less. So here's my question for you tonight. If you had to choose, would you rather have someone show up rarely but completely present, or often but only halfway there? Let me know what you think in the comments. If this story meant something to you, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't yet, because we've got more stories like this coming every week. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.